I have a bit of a confession to make. I'm actually kind of enjoying Madden NFL 23. No, I'm not ready to say that Madden 23 is better than NFL 2K5 or All Pro Football 2K8 or even Madden 2006. Nor am I going to say that it currently represents a good football simulation game. I wrote a scathing review on my blog back in September, and I stand by that review, especially as a time capsule of the messy state of the game at release. Don't worry, my series on how Madden fails to simulate football will continue into the foreseeable future. The biggest issue was, of course, the broken interception AI sliders that allowed both CPU and user DBs to make impossible interceptions all the time. This one bug completely defeated the entire purpose of the new passing mechanics. It doesn't matter where I place the ball or how hard I charge the accuracy meter if a DB can, in a single frame of animation, overcome 5 yards of separation to make a blind swatter interception. It took until October before that was fixed, which is, frankly, inexcusable. Even after that fix, I still have a litany of complaints about both the on-field gameplay and the franchise mode. Yeah, you can still run money plays over and over and over again, and the CPU will never make any meaningful adjustments to shut it down. Yes, the CPU is still far too dependent on passing the ball, and refuses to run, even if I set the CPU's run blocking slider to 100, and they're being successful with the few runs that they do call. Yes, Robo-QBs still pop up almost every match, regardless of the AI slider settings. CPU QBs will still back up deeper into the pocket and take 15-yard sacks instead of stepping up or scrambling for positive yards. Screen passes are still completely broken in multiple ways, especially if the screen running back is the triangle receiver. My DBs are constantly getting beat on in-breaking routes, even when I shade them inside pre-play, which I do pretty much every play because the CPU is constantly beating me with in-breaking routes. The kick meter still stutters, even in offline single-player. I absolutely hate the streamlined no-huddle mechanic that gives defenses no time to even pick a play, let alone make pre-play adjustments. And more broadly, I just hate that after picking a play, the game skips immediately to the offense being at the line of scrimmage. Momentum effects are all either completely ignorable or completely and utterly broken. Weather has little to no effect on gameplay. Scouting is still a pathetically passive process, and the new weekly training feature is a pathetic shadow of the older skill trainer practice mode that actually taught real football concepts. And the list goes on and on and on. But I'm not supposed to be here right now to complain about these problems, many of which have been in the game for years now, and many of which are things that I've already complained about. And I do not blame you one bit if any one of those, or the combination of them, makes Madden 23 dead on arrival for you. I'm not going to try to convince you to give Madden 23 another shot, and I still recommend that if you do decide to buy the game, that you please buy it pre-owned so as to continue to put financial pressure on EA to show consistent improvement. As if that's worth anything at this point. It's December. If you've bought the game, I'm sure you've done it already. But believe me, there are plenty of people eager to get rid of this game on eBay. So you can still get copies from there instead of buying a new one retail. Instead, I want to express my surprise that I'm actually still playing Madden 23 in December. Usually I'm done with this game by mid-October. I want to share some of my observations about the gameplay, and I want to highlight some of the subtle indications that EA and Tiburon might actually maybe be learning from past failures and criticisms of the game in recent years, including some criticisms that I myself have levied against them. First and foremost, a big part of why I'm still playing the game is because I actually managed to find a slider set that I feel is consistently giving me decent, realistic enough results on 15-minute quarter-length matches. Or at least I was back in September and October, until the most recent 2 patches in November made the game frustratingly easy. Since sliders are always a work in progress due to EA frequently updating the game, I'm not going to go through all my slider settings in detail. Instead, I'm going to go through a few of my key observations with how the sliders work this year. First of all, I play my franchise matches on the All-Pro difficulty setting using Simulation Game Mode. I set quarter length to 15 minutes and the accelerated clock is at 13 or 14 seconds. This ensures that the CPU team is usually snapping the ball inside of 10 seconds and makes it possible for the CPU to actually get a delay of game penalty if they try to do too many pre-play adjustments or have any complicated pre-play motion. Next up is the injury and fatigue settings. Progressive fatigue is still completely broken. It barely affects the user team, but it completely cripples CPU teams by the end of the season and during the playoffs, as all of their starters will be nerfed by fatigue, and they'll be playing their backup fullback as the lead halfback. There's two options here. First is to leave progressive fatigue enabled throughout the season, and then disable progressive fatigue before advancing to the wildcard round. Then lower the fatigue slider to 0 for the first week of playoffs, so that all the CPU players restore their fatigue levels. Then you can hopefully set everything back after advancing to the divisional round. The second option is to leave progressive fatigue off the entire season and just increase the fatigue slider into the high 60s or 70s so that more substitutions happen. I don't know why it is so hard for Madden's programmers to just add a check for the CPU team each week to set practice intensity to half pads if team average fatigue falls below a certain threshold, or to practice backups if the starters at a position have low fatigue. That seems like it's the bare minimum of what CPU teams should be programmed to do if you're going to implement this feature to begin with. But such is the nature of Madden. This problem was in Madden 22, so they've had 2 years to fix it and just didn't. I also lowered the speed threshold so that fast players are actually dangerous and have to be respected, but I didn't lower it all the way down to 0, which in my opinion just makes fast players impossible to defend and utterly overpowered. With this setting, I can actually break the occasional 60-yard run with Justin Fields without him being caught from behind by a defensive end. Due to the proliferation of robo-QBs, I've usually lowered the CPU QB accuracy slider into the low 40s in past years of Madden. However, this year, I read somewhere online, I don't remember where, it might have been Reddit or it might have been an Operation Sports forum. Anyway, it said that reducing the QB slider below 50 is one of the reasons that CPU QBs will hold on to the ball too long and backpedal deeper into the pocket for those frequent 10 or 15-yard sacks. This has also been a consistent problem in the past few years, so I actually tried to increase the CPU accuracy slider above 50 to see how CPU QBs would perform. This won't eliminate the problem of CPU QBs dropping back deeper against pressure and taking those deep sacks, but they do seem to do it less often with the accuracy slider above 50. Now, you would think that increasing QB accuracy would exacerbate robo-QB problems. But I paired this setting with 2 changes to other sliders to help mitigate the robo-QB issue. First, I slightly lowered the CPU pass blocking. Anywhere between 45 to 49 works, depending on how good your D-line is and how often you blitz. This allows my team to get pressure even with just a 4-man rush. The extra defenders in coverage, the quicker pressure, and the QB accuracy combine to cause CPU QBs to throw to open checkdowns more often instead of forcing the ball 15 or 20 yards downfield every single play. Yes, their completion percentage is still usually high, but their yards per completion is lower and CPU drives last longer and take up more clock time, which helps to reduce overall yardage and scores. And I get a much more realistic 0 to 3 sacks per game instead of 6 or more every game. Secondly, and more importantly, I lowered the CPU's catching slider. I found that anywhere from 36 to 44 seems to work okay. Even though QBs will be more accurate and will get the ball off more quickly, CPU receivers will drop a lot more contested catches and catches in traffic, and will also occasionally just drop open passes as well. This knocks a good 5 or 10% off of CPU completion percentages, which helps to offset the robo-QB problem, and can also kill enough CPU drives to result in more punts and the occasional field goal instead of just touchdown, 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 interception every drive. And of course, since this is an all-pro slider set, I had to do something to mitigate psychic CPU DBs. So I decreased CPU DB reaction time and the interception slider in order to offset the fact that all pro DBs are psychic and can make blind swats and interceptions. But I kept the pass coverage slider well above 50 so that my receivers aren't wide open all the time. This helps to make it so that just a step or two of separation can be enough to hit a receiver. You don't need 5 yards of separation in order to get the ball in and then still occasionally have a speed burst or motion warping DB jump in and swat it. That still happens, it just doesn't happen as often. Now, the user sliders are a lot more up to your individual preferences, but here's what I use. I lower my own QB accuracy and receiver catching so that money plays like drags and dagger routes aren't guaranteed to work every time I run them. I also buff my defensive pass coverage to help rein in the CPU's pass game a little bit more, but I decrease the interception slider so that I'm not picking off 3 or 4 interceptions every single game. Now that I've talked about some of the settings that I've implemented in the game to help make it a little bit more enjoyable for myself and, which may or may not make the game more enjoyable for you, I want to talk more about some of the positive signs that I'm seeing from Madden 23 in terms of what EA and Tiburon are doing with the game. Much to my surprise, EA and Tiburon look like they might actually be learning from criticisms of recent iterations of the game, and they are actually trying to iterate on some of the ideas that didn't work so well in past games, instead of just throwing them in the garbage completely. As I've already mentioned in my How Madden Fails video about the pass rush, Tiburon has revisited the throw out of sack mechanics that proved to be rather unpopular in Madden 17. As of Madden 21, throws out of sacks will often be driven into the ground or fly out of bounds instead of just popping up into the air for an easy pick six by a defensive lineman. This is much more realistic and also much better game design. Users aren't punished with a turnover and potential opponent score for being slightly late on the timing of a throw, which in Madden 17 felt like it was an excessive punishment for a relatively minor user mistake. Next up, Madden 23 revisited the targeted passing mechanic that was added in Madden 18 and then scrapped the year after. The new passing charge meter allows the user to similarly aim passes by holding down a modifier button, same basic thing that they did in Madden 18. But this time around, there has been extra care taken to make the feature more user-friendly. First and foremost, there is now an option to slow down time while aiming the pass to help less experienced users place the cursor where they want it. There's also options to change the sensitivity of the aiming cursor, which, as far as I remember, was not an option in Madden 18. Users can also customize the size of the aiming reticle, which allows users to lead the receiver further without having to move the stick as much. Personally, I recommend using the far setting for the reticle distance, since the default setting doesn't seem to reliably lead receivers far enough. The charge mechanic also slightly slows down the throwing motion, which helps to alleviate the long-standing problem of QBs being able to hit any receiver on the field with the push of a button. QBs really have to anticipate throws in advance in order to hit narrow windows and to avoid sacks, which means user QBs need to have a better understanding of the routes their receivers are running and how to read the defense. Gee, if only the franchise mode still let us play skill trainer drills in order to practice concepts and reading keys. That would be nice. Next up, Madden 23 also iterated on the tackle battle mechanic that was introduced in Madden 17, or was it 16? I think it was 17. I hated the tackle battle mechanic, and I couldn't believe that it stayed in the game for as long as it did. The new mechanic, however, is surprisingly a big improvement over the crapshoot that was the original tackle battle. Originally, the user has to hit a random face button to instantly break a tackle, in complete defiance of the physics and animation. Now, in Madden 23, the user has to mash the X button on a PlayStation controller in order to shove the defender off. This makes more sense because the X button is the stiff arm button. So it makes sense that that would be the button that I would use to shove a tackler off the runner. Further, the new mechanic has some risk and reward, and thus strategy associated with using it. Runners don't instantly shed the tackle the way they did in Madden 17. Now they get stood up for a second or two, which allows other defenders to hit them and possibly also to strip the ball. It's extremely risky now to fight to break a tackle and risk a defender punching the ball out, and it's often safer to just let your runner go down. So yeah, there's that new element of strategy that wasn't there before. Lastly, I want to give Tiburon some credit for subtle improvements to the college scouting UI. Yeah, the scouting mechanic is still stale and passive, and it's a far cry from the greatness of NCAA football's old in-season recruiting mechanic, but Tiburon did clean up the UI to at least make scouting a little easier and more user-friendly. The main prospect menu now highlights 4 position-relevant skills for each prospect without the user having to drill down to multiple submenus. This makes it easier to compare prospects at a glance when trying to, say, order them on your draft board or just pick which ones you actually want to get more detailed information about. Setting positional focuses is also a lot easier and less prone to game-breaking bugs. The system as a whole still sucks, but at least it's a lot more usable. Now, Madden has rightfully received a lot of criticism over the years for removing features in one game and then repackaging them in later years to resell them to us sucker gamers again years later. And that is a valid criticism. If the repackaged feature actually is the same feature and doesn't add anything new to the game. However, as I just pointed out, each of these revised features isn't just a verbatim repackaging of an old feature. Tiburon actually went back, looked at the criticisms of those old mechanics, and revised them at fundamental levels to make them more realistic representations of the sport of football, and also to turn them into more intuitive and interesting and fair gameplay mechanics. This isn't just copy and paste. It's genuine improvement. I firmly believe in giving credit where credit is due, and I also firmly believe that Tiburon deserves credit for actually putting some thought into these revised mechanics and genuinely improving them, instead of simply throwing away potentially good ideas in favor of some other new, poorly thought out, half-assed, poorly implemented feature, which is what they used to do in the past. Earlier this year, I posted a pair of videos about the humanity of NCAA football's in-season recruiting mechanic and how it treated prospects more like characters rather than commodities. This gave gamers a stronger attachment to the player that they were recruiting and helped make the in-season recruiting as engaging and addictive as it ended up being. Madden has never really had anything like this because Madden has always treated the players on rosters as if they are simple commodities instead of as people with wants and desires of their own. The closest Madden ever came was back in 2006 with the Storyline Central mechanic that gave each player a set of desires that they want from any team that they play for, and failing to meet those needs and desires would lead to the player demanding a trade or refusing to re-sign or potentially causing some locker room drama. Well, Madden 23 has reintroduced a similar system. I didn't include this in the previous section about Tiburon improving on iterated ideas because I actually don't see this new motivation system as an improvement over what Madden 2006's Storyline Central did. Players in Madden 23 are not demanding trades in the middle of the season or causing locker room drama as they might have done in Madden 2006. If their 3 simple demands aren't met, they simply cost more to sign in free agency. But they do actually now have their own personal wants that the user has to take into consideration when drafting a contract proposal. It's not a lot, but it is a very small tiptoey step in the direction of humanizing the players in the NFL within Madden. I also like the player tags mechanic in Madden 23. At least, I like it in principle. So far, in my experience with the game, it isn't making a huge difference in how CPU teams structure their rosters. Many of the tags also feel kind of superficial and pointless. The one tag that I really like is the mentor tag. Mentors are veteran players who give bonus experience to other players at the same position. This gives a lot of extra value to signing an experienced veteran player, even if he's lower rated than other options, and even if he's not going to be your starter. They can really help to quickly improve a young developmental roster. This is something that I've actually wanted to be in the game for years and have recommended that EA add to the game. Personally, I think it's better suited as a trait or like an X Factor ability rather than a tag, because it actually is an ability that provides a bonus beyond just determining CPU trades or free agency interest. But whatever, I'm glad that it's finally in the game. Beggars can't be choosers and all that. Regardless of the limitations and weaknesses of these new features, the motivations and mentor tag in particular do add that tiny shred of humanity to Madden's roster and team building, and I hope that Tiburon continues to expand upon these ideas in future years. Despite the respect that I have for some of these small features and iterative improvements in Madden 23, I still feel like the game as a whole is a marginal improvement over last year's game and still shows a lot of sloppiness in its coding and its quality assurance. People are reporting the franchise save games become corrupt, that the draft suddenly resets, and that there's still other numerous stability problems to go along with the gameplay issues that have been present for years. I also had to disable the practice squad stealing feature in my franchise because I took the quite the sales pitch player personnel talent. This makes the CPU think that all of my players are stars or superstars, and so they immediately sign all of my practice squad players. This completely kills the ability to develop young players over multiple years and makes all the draft picks after about the third round moot and pointless. I was able to temporarily disable the trade deadline, then steal players from the other team's practice squads, and then trade them back in exchange for my old practice squad players. Then I turned off practice squad stealing and reset the trade deadline. So I was able to fix the problem, but it's a problem that I should not have had to fix to begin with. It's super sloppy and careless coding from EA and Tiburon that this works the way that it does. Stealing practice squad players is something that should be allowed within the game because it discourages teams from stashing high-rated players on the practice squad in order to, say, stay under the salary cap or roster size limits. Signing players from other teams' practice squads does not happen in real life too often, but it does happen in the NFL, and so it should be allowed to happen in Madden. But this one thoughtless coach talent completely breaks the whole feature and is, in my opinion, unlikely to ever get fixed. I also want to provide this massive disclaimer that my enjoyment of Madden may have far more to do with the circumstances of the real-life Chicago Bears than of the actual quality of Madden as a game. The Bears are currently in a rebuilding year with a new coaching staff, a roster full of young developmental players, such as second-year quarterback Justin Fields, and they have plenty of cap space to play around with. Because of the new coaching staff, I feel more inclined to create a custom coaching avatar and run this team my way, instead of trying to run the team the way that I think the real-life GM and coach will do. I picked my own scheme and created my own playbook based on a combination of what the Ravens and the Bills are doing offensively. I'm frequently running 2 or 3 back sets that put both David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert in the backfield at the same time, and then running options and triple options out of those sets. If the defense is going to key off of Justin Fields on the run, then I can hand the ball to David Montgomery up the middle or toss it to Khalil Herbert on the perimeter. I mix in some play-action rollouts with speedy receivers Darnell Mooney and Velus Jones running crossing routes across the field to strained man coverages, and I'm having fun doing it. I'm also more engaged with roster management. I'm looking for free agents to fill in weak spots, and I'm looking at possible trades during the season. I'm also trying to play younger, lower-rated players in order to give them experience and level them up, instead of simply playing the highest-rated players at every position. Yeah, sure, it's still Madden, so defenses aren't learning my tendencies and adapting to my triple threat backfield. I have to tweak sliders and avoid running too many money plays so that I don't blow every opponent out by 40 or 50 points. Nevertheless, the game is still getting too easy, and my enjoyment is finally starting to slip. I had some fun with the game, but I don't know how much longer that fun will last. But with all the negativity that I've posted about Madden over the years, I just wanted to take some time to say something positive about the game for a change. If for nothing else, then to prove that I am willing to give Madden a fair chance, and that I'm not just a hater who hates the game for the sake of hating the game. Credit where credit is due. Thanks for watching.